Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the National Bicycle Dealers Association here this morning. This is Rochelle Scouten, Development Director, and we have partnered with Accessiby today to give you a presentation on what web accessibility and ADA compliance mean for you and your business, and to show you what they can do for your website. So we have Rafi here from Accessiby. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. It's very nice to be here and be able to speak about this. I am going to give a brief presentation about what is web accessibility and the relevant compliances involved, a little bit of an overview of our solution and an explanation of all the features. After that, I'll be happy to do a quick demonstration or answer any questions you have, or both. So first things first, what is web accessibility? It's a set of rules, behaviors, code standards, and design guidelines meant to allow people with disabilities to effectively use websites. Now, really quickly, effectively is different from equally. While of course I want everybody to have equal access, I can't give a fully blind person the exact same experience on, let's say, Netflix as I could give a sighted person. That being said, I could still give them the ability to extract the same information and perform the same actions. And that's what's required here. This, by the way, addresses tons of different disabilities ranging from full-on blindness, like we mentioned, to epilepsy, aging-related disorders. And in fact, one thing that many people don't realize can cause someone to need to use a screen reader, where it's technology that actually reads all the content on a web page out to someone, is dyslexia. People who are not blind or anything, but dyslexia is the most common learning disability in the United States among children, so it does certainly affect things here. The laws that are relevant in the United States are ADA Title III and Section 508. Section 508 generally refers to government organizations or people that get government funding. ADA Title III refers to everybody else. And in 2018, the Department of Justice actually issued a ruling stating that business websites are considered places of public accommodations, which is a legal term that basically means it needs to be accessible to everyone, regardless of disability. And the WCAG, which was 2.0, now it's 2.1, we're waiting on the most recent version, is the only internationally recognized set of guidelines for web accessibility. It's actually called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, and it's created by the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. We listed IS 5568 here really briefly because it's the Israeli regulation. Our company was founded in Israel, and it's one of the very, very few regulations on earth that is more stringent than Section 508, and so we comply with that first. We're very happy to be able to comply with regulations worldwide. This is a little bit of information about the legal atmosphere, and from what I understand of this organization, there were multiple members of this organization that were targeted with litigation. And there are two sources of this litigation. You can get it from a genuine person with disabilities who really just wants to buy something from you, and you can get it from a predatory attorney. Whichever person you get it from, whether it's an attorney or it's just a person who wants to use your website, the best solution is to become compliant immediately, because paying a settlement not only does not remediate the problems on your website, it doesn't mean that people can come after you immediately after. And as an example, I'll say that a very fond memory I have was traveling immediately before coronavirus to Las Vegas, where I gave a presentation earlier this year, and was interrupted mid-presentation by a gentleman who owns a large group of payday loan companies. They had 60 locations. He got a demand letter for one location for $10,000. They made the decision at the company to pay the demand letter and hope it goes away. The day that they paid, they got 59 more letters. So that is just one example of how these can be very good opportunities to extract capital from companies. And again, the only and best response and way to prevent this is to become compliant ahead of time, because if they've already served you with papers, there's a limit to what can be done to ameliorate that in many cases. This is just a little bit of sort of the atmosphere, the marketplace that we're in right now. And before Accessiby came to market, you really had only two options. You had manual services or plugins. And as far as plugins go, you have, they do good things. You have UserWay or WP Access or others. But in general, they don't comply fully with the legislation that's relevant. They're free or low cost, but they provide maybe 5 to 15% of what is actually required without any ongoing maintenance. And often they make money through manual audits or other services that they provide. Manual services, are, on the other hand, like AudioEye or User First, they can provide complete compliance. They can bring you into WCAG 2.1 AA compliance. The problem is it's going to be prohibitively expensive because they have skilled developers who need to work for hours and hours and hours on your website on an ongoing basis. The initial project can take up to 6 months. And then if you don't continue to buy the additional services and updates every time that you continue to update your website with anything, your compliance can drop precipitously very quickly. And of course, even a 95% compliant website can be approached with litigation. It's the United States. Anybody can sue anybody for anything. This is a large part of why we created Accessibility, because we knew that web accessibility was not going to be widespread until it was affordable, automated, and simple enough that a business owner would be able to do it on their own. We adhere to WCAG 2.1 AA standards, which means that we are compliant with the ADA and Section 508, everything else that we need to be compliant with. Our pricing, we're very proud that it's still very affordable, we believe, starting at less than $500 a year, and we do have monthly plans as well. And we become, any website with Accessibility will become accessible up to 48 hours from installation. Basically, we have a shot clock. Once you've installed Accessibility on your website, it's 48 hours from that moment, you're going to get a statement of accessibility. It could very well be before. And then the moment you get the statement of accessibility from us, which I'll touch on in a moment, we do what's called a rescan every 24 hours. I call it a shot clock because it's every 24 hours or every update. And this is to make sure that whenever somebody checks your website, it's still accessible and the statement of accessibility that we gave you is still valid. We work on an ongoing basis with people with disabilities to improve our product and make sure that it works for them. And on top of that, really quickly here, I want to mention that we are partnered with DigitalOcean, who ensure that all of our hosting and our digital assets are at the very, very highest security possible. On this slide, I have to apologize. It's a little bit out of date. We're well over 50,000 small businesses now. But what I like to say here, even though we took off the Burger King logo, is that whether you are Burger King or Burger Joint on the corner, you get exactly the same service at exactly the same price. And we're very proud to be able to say that because we actually have Burger King, we actually have Burger Joints on the corners. This is a picture of the accessibility statement. It's just a document that goes into detail about what's been done to make your website accessible, and it doubles as a certification of performance. These are the monthly compliance audits that we'll send to your email directly, and they just confirm your compliance and explain if you have any egregious issues. And this is in the event that you receive a lawsuit or demand letter. In that event, we're going to send you, first things first, a compliance audit, because immediately, of course, you'll tell us, hey, we received a lawsuit. How are we going to address this? So we'll send you first a compliance audit on the relevant website to ensure that, yes, this website is accessible. We'll also send you a compliance overview, which is going to explain to the complainant exactly how to operate our systems, because there's a good chance that they just didn't understand how to turn on various features. We'll also include a failures request master, which is a long and detailed spreadsheet where they can log and document specific accessibility holes that they perceive, and then we can either address those as needed or explain that they're not real. Then, of course, we'll resend you your accessibility statement so you have it easily and available, and we'll send you our suggested response, which is just a form letter that we've had very, very good success with. I can tell you that in our experience, we've had more than 2,500 customers come to our doors, figuratively, not literally, with papers in hand. And in every last case, we either managed to significantly reduce or completely eliminate any settlement that they needed to pay. This is our installation process. It is extremely simple. We just have one line of JavaScript code. Immediately on installation, our interface will appear, and that is when our AI will start working. Over the next 48 hours or less, your website will become compliant. You'll get that statement of accessibility by email, and our 24-hour shot clock will start. This is a little bit of the differentiation between the two parts of our interface. So on the sort of front side, we have the colors, cursors, fonts, contrast, adjustments. For me, I'm not a developer, so that seems pretty complex. But according to developers, that's the easy part. The developers also say that the difficult part is the AI side. And the reason that's more difficult is because the AI uses multiple components, which are iris, OCR, and contextual understanding, in order to not only look at images and determine what is inside them, what are the objects inside of them, what are the words inside of them, how can we write that down into a sensible alternative text for a user. We also use the contextual understanding engine to evaluate the entire page and the website and how it's put together and then identify, oh, this is an e-commerce website. Okay, so this menu should be here, and so on and so forth. And so instead of having to pay a skilled human to do that, our robot can do it on the fly. And it's also important to mention that all of this happens on the session. So with actually all manual accessibility adjustments, you're permanently changing the design of your website. And in general, especially in the e-commerce world, you've worked very hard to optimize that design of the website for sales. So with Accessibility, you don't have to change your design at all. Instead, every user will have a unique session so that if they want to toggle Accessibility and change the color, change the fonts, or change anything, they can do that without impacting anybody else's experience. This is our interface. You can customize it to your heart's content as far as colors and icons go. These are a few more videos about us, and that's that for the initial presentation. Does anybody have questions so far? Okay, so I think Brandy, unless you have any objections, I'm just going to pull up a quick demonstration window, and I will go through a brief demonstration. I think we'll open things up to questions. Does that sound good?
That sounds good.
Excelente. Let me share my screen. Hold on. Stop. And there we go. So can you see new summer collection?
There you go. Yes.
I'm going to assume yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. So the first thing I want to point out is this page looks a little screwy. You know, this is not centered or anything. And that's actually because I have been using this demo site and it remembered my settings. It uses local storage, not cookies to do that, so we don't affect GDPR or anything like that. But if somebody's actually disabled, it's a lot more convenient for them, for us to remember their settings than for them to reset them every single time they need to do something. So on the front side, there's a few basic adjustments that we can make immediately. One is readable font. So this just switches the font to the default on the person's computer. We assume that they can read that. We can also highlight titles. We can highlight links, and this just draws lines around them and makes them more obvious. We can adjust the font sizes and make them larger. We can align it left or center or right. You have a reading mask here. And a lot of these features are involved in some of the profiles that I'll show you in just a moment. You can hide all of the images. You can use a reading guide. You have a virtual keyboard that pops up. And one thing that's also very important is you can adjust specific title colors, because some people have specific color blindnesses. So they may only be able to see reds and oranges, or may not be able to see anything purple or blue. And that varies from person to person. So as far as the profiles go, it's one of the more innovative things that we did for two reasons. The first reason is it makes it really obvious to everybody exactly what we support. It makes it very easy to identify, even especially if you have a disability, hey, I need to turn this on, I need to turn that on, particularly with epilepsy. And that's extremely important because of all of these disabilities. If you're not accessible to most of them, it's an inconvenience. If you have animations on a website and somebody has epilepsy, it could potentially be deadly. And so, of course, that's something that we want to address immediately, because a gift like this, there are people out there that could be hurt by that. So if we do epilepsy safe profile, everything is stopped, and that protects them, of course, and it also dulls the colors a little bit. We have a visually impaired profile that does the opposite, that sort of brightens everything up. We have an ADHD friendly profile that includes that mask. It just has fewer distractions and more focus. And then we have blind users, screen reader with keyboard navigation, and that's really the much more involved aspect of this. So what I'm going to do is reset the settings again, and then I'm going to show you how we would toggle adjustments for a screen reader. Because if somebody is using a screen reader to read out the content to them on the page because they can't see, they need that available to them from the moment they turn on their computer. They won't be able to turn it on with the mouse or anything. So that being the case, we notice any website that has Accessibility on it will detect a screen reader active on the session immediately and automatically send a voice note saying, hi, you've entered an accessible website. Please hit Alt-1 to turn on accessible mode for a screen reader, which is what they will then, of course, do. And very briefly, if I inspect this image here, I can see there's absolutely zero alt text, right? We built the website this way. It's not supposed to be that way. It's not compliance at all. But now, if I hit Alt 1, I get alt text, and it says extra sale, 30% off, shop now, shopping, stock, and shop. And that is exactly what's in there. And we get the same with this. You say sale, Black Friday sale, illustration, and design. And as far as how descriptive these are, we've recently had multiple experiences with members of the blind community who explained to us that in some cases, making a much more descriptive screen reader description can be very frustrating for a screen reader user, because there is a very big difference between someone who needs to have content read out to them and someone who needs to have that content read out more slowly because they may have a cognitive impairment. And many people who use screen readers and who are blind are much, much, much faster than those of us who are not. In particular, one of the gentlemen who worked with us to create this product, Adi, he can type and listen to voiceover so fast that he had to slow it down to 40% to give a presentation to me and some of my colleagues. So that being the case, I think that this text is actually perfect. On top of that, I want to show you just the keyboard navigation, and then I think we'll be good to open it up to questions. On the keyboard navigation, it's super important that drop downs are opened automatically, and it's also extremely important that pop-ups are opened automatically. Or excuse me, that pop-ups are not opened automatically, but when you open a pop-up, there's a note. And this note that says pop-up panel, press escape to close, navigate with tab, if that doesn't pop up on somebody who's using a screen reader's account or experience or session, however you want to term it, they have no way of knowing that they're in a pop-up. And so in some cases, they actually have to restart their computer just to leave your website, which is, of course, terrible UX. But with Accessibility, you can navigate through the whole thing just using your tab key. You can exit, you can continue through the rest of the website, and everything functions as it should. I would be happy to demonstrate anything else specific, but this is that is pretty much it.
All right, we had a question come through about one of our bike dealer specific websites, Smart Etailing. We have been talking to Ryan Atkinson at Smart Etailing. Because this is just a line of code that you put into your website, it will be able to work with Smart E, but they are currently testing it to see if it is completely compatible. And we should have that answer from them by next week when Ryan Atkinson is with us to do his webinar on Smart E web accessibility. So we will have that answer with Smart Etailing. They are testing it currently.
Okay.
We have another question for you, Rafi. How is Accessibility different from the other plugin solutions that are available?
I would say that Accessibility is different because we provide a full accessibility solution. The other plugins that were mentioned, for instance, UserWay or WP Access, provide maybe 5 to 15% of the WCAG requirements that are needed to actually be considered accessible, whereas Accessibility provides all of them.
All right, and we got one more too. So will the system work with e-commerce? A lot of our dealers on their websites have their website linked to their POS system to show all of their product on their website. So will Accessibility work on the product pages as well?
Absolutely. In the event that if it's content that's iframed onto the page, then Accessibility generally doesn't have any way of remediating that particular information inside the iframe. But everything else, we have literally tens of thousands of e-commerce websites working with us today.
Perfect. All right. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to put them in the question box or in the chat box. I don't see anyone else coming through right now.
Remy, this is Brandy here, or Rafi, I'm sorry. I had a question about the screen readers. We had gotten
Sure.
comments of people saying that when you have an overlay or a plugin, that it can interfere with their existing reader. Have you seen
I
that
would
happen?
imagine that can happen with other plugins or other tools. Accessibility is designed specifically to work with existing screen readers. That's actually why we don't have a built-in screen reader on our tool, because it would do exactly what you're saying, interfere with the existing one. So we are actually specifically designed to work well with existing screen readers.
All right, we just had a question come through. Does Accessibility change the aesthetics and function of the website for everyday visitors who are not disabled?
It can, and that's a great question, because that's another perspective on what Accessibility does. Anybody, whether disabled or not, is welcome to click on the icon and make whatever changes they'd like. The nice thing is it's only their session that's affected. So not only can they refresh the page if they don't like the changes that they made, but it's not going to change anyone else's experience. So while you may have people with, full-on blindness or dyslexia or other disabilities using the website with assistive technology, you may also have a 70-year-old or an 80-year-old who just prefers a little bit of a larger font and finds it easier to shop online that way. And in my mind, anything that we can do to make it easier for people to pay us is great.
Perfect. And one more. Somebody says, perhaps I missed this, but how do you put Accessibility on your website?
Great question. It's just one line of code. You would need to go to our website and sign up and everything, and we have an interface where you can actually generate the code that you want that's specifically designed for your website. So generally, you'll pick the color and the icon of your choosing so that it matches your design.
Great. Okay.
I had a couple of questions really quick, Rochelle.
Mhm.
So, Rafi, for our retailers who already received letters, demand letters from attorneys,
Mhm.
how would we handle this? Like they install it and that shows that we're making an effort. You send those letters to the attorney, and then does it usually go away?
In many cases, it will go away once you show that you've made a significant effort towards achieving compliance and are on the path towards it. That being said, it depends on what happens with that particular lawyer. They can do whatever they want. They could sue you again if they really wanted to. In our experience, it really depends on the amount of time that's passed between them receiving the demand letter and us remediating their website. Usually, in most jurisdictions, they have to give at least 14 days between sending the demand, between sort of the person receives a demand letter, they have 14 days to fix the website, or more than 14 days to fix the website. And if you fix it within the time frame that they offered, they really can't ask for a settlement because you did what they said. If you don't respond in the given time frame, or you do respond and say we're not going to be accessible or we can't or something like that, then they may have a legitimate claim. And in that case, there's a limited amount that we can do, except for make you compliant going forward so that it's not an issue, and do everything that we can to prove that not only is this now an accessible website, but it will be in the future. That we've made changes and we're continuing to explain to your team or whomever's team, this is how you sort of keep accessibility in mind with design. Because even with accessibility, there are some things you shouldn't do.
Thank you.
Of course.
All right, more questions coming in. Somebody has a question about the pricing. Can you go over the pricing one more time?
Absolutely. So in fact, why don't I just pull it up, because that will solve this problem.
There we go.
Show screen. There we go. Okay. So that is our standard pricing. Our pricing, by the way, is based on page count and not on unique visitors or traffic or anything like that. So if you have less than 1,000 unique pages on your website, it's under $500 a year. Under 10,000 unique pages, it's going to be $14.90 a year. Under 100,000 unique pages, it's going to be $2,000 a year. And under 1 million pages, it's $3,500 a year. If you have more than 1 million pages, contact us and we'll sort something out.
All right, so we've got a question here about litigation. So the question says, you said that of 2,500 people that filed a claim that was brought to your attention, you stated that in all cases, most or all of the claims were closed with no or minimal costs. For those that ended up paying a settlement, do you know how much on average they did pay? And do you have any insurance that comes with your software package that will cover legal costs if your software doesn't solve the problem?
Sure. So we don't insure or indemnify. Sorry about that. We don't insure or indemnify, but we've had very, very good success in handling these claims. And as to the number that's usually settled for, to my knowledge, it's less than $2,500 in general, as opposed to 10,000 plus settlement. The reason is very simple, that neither party actually wants to pursue this in court, because from the perspective of a predatory attorney, they have no reason to go to court. It costs a lot of money, and the settlement that they're going to get in the end isn't really going to cover the costs, and then you have to pay court fees, and then nobody really wins. What they want is either a settlement or to move on to the next victim, which is an incredibly depressing scenario to be in, but it puts us in a position of power because we can say very clearly, hey, we've made this website accessible. You can't claim it isn't anymore. Good luck. And if somebody wants to, take it that far, we will provide the proof until the day is over that this website is accessible.
Great. All right. We have a specific question here about, has Accessibility been tested with Lightspeed e-commerce websites? We use their template called Comply for ADA purposes, but I'm not sure it's enough.
So that's a really good point. And I actually work with multiple partners who are CMSs, content management systems, who have built-in accessibility requirements. So for instance, there's one that won't let you upload an image without an alt text on it for accessibility reasons. And in a lot of cases, it can significantly improve your situation. That being said, if you're uploading content to that template and changing anything on that template, then it may very well no longer be accessible because you may not be doing the manual work on your uploaded content to remediate it or make it accessible. As far, specifically, I'd be happy to address that, one-on-one if we need to, but in general, it's very, very, very difficult for anyone, even an accessibility expert, to make a website perfectly accessible manually, because things are changed on websites very frequently today, particularly on e-commerce. It's rare that you have a day that you're not uploading something new.
All right. I don't see any new questions coming through. Brandy, do you have anything else?
I do not. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. I was very happy to be here and explain everything. And if there are any other questions, I will be very happy to answer those too.
Perfect. If you do have any more questions, feel free to email us, info@nbda.com, and we will pass those on and get your questions answered. We'll also send out a link that you can go and view the service for yourself after this webinar. So thank you everyone for joining, and we will see you next week.